Hello friends, let's talk about authentication and authorization. So these are the standards in the LMS: authenticate and authorize users in a server-side application, and also harden a server-side application against security vulnerabilities. And these are all the things you need to make that happen. So I'm going to walk you through doing that today. So we're going to use this repo called user stickers cred. This is just a basic Express JSON API that has a users table and a stickers table. And users can have many stickers. So if you want to follow along, this URL will be in the description. So just clone it down locally. So I will git clone that. And let's open it up with Atom. Oh, not that. Oh, let's go into the directory. So let's go into user stickers cred and open Atom in there. Cool. So if you open up the README, you will see there is a pretty easy getting started. If you just run this command in your terminal, /setup, it will create the database, it will install dependencies, it will migrate the database, and then it will seed the database also. So if you do that one command, /setup, that will do everything required to get that app ready to go. And then you can just say nodemon, and the app should start up. Once it's started, you can go to a browser, go to localhost 3000. You should see welcome to Express. But also if you do /user/1, you should see at least one user. And there also was another user in there that got seeded. You can also see user stickers. So if you go user/2/sticker, you can see the stickers that are owned by that specific user. And same thing, if we change this ID to 1, you can see their stickers. So that's the basic functionality of our Express app. But what we're going to do is add login so that when user 1 is logged in, he can only add stickers to his page, and he can only see his stickers. When user 2 logs in, they can only see their stickers and can only add to their stickers. So we're going to be locking things down using authentication and authorization. So first, let's remind ourselves of the sign-up process. So yeah, let's look at this one. So let's say someone is trying to sign up for your website. They will have a client of some kind, and we're going to build one. But let's say that client makes a post request to /signup on your Express server. In this case, example.org. But they send the information they want to use to sign up, so their email and their password. So this is a post request just like you've been used to, but in this case, we're actually sending user information to be created. So once that information makes it to the server, we first need to verify that there is no user in the database with that specific password. Right? We need to make sure that this is a unique user because we don't want users signing up twice with the same email. So once we verified that, we then hash the password. So we'll talk a bit more about what that is and how to do it, but essentially we don't store the actual password that they entered into the login form. We don't store that in our database. We store a hashed version of it. So once we've hashed it, we then insert that user into the database. And of course, you can insert other columns here, but in this simple example, this user has an email and a password. So in summary, first check that the email is not in use, so you don't create a duplicate user. Then hash the password using bcrypt. And finally, store the email and hash password in the database. Now, if we look at how this looks in code, we'll implement this. We'll actually be adding a little bit of validation on top. But let's just look at the kind of the flow, right? So sign up flow. Find user by email. Did you find them? Yes, I did. Well, send an email in use error because you don't want duplicate users. Okay, find a user by email. Found. No, I did not. Is the email and password valid? So we can do some validation. We can make sure that there's like an @ sign, that there's a domain in the email. We can make sure that the password contains certain characters of a certain length. If it doesn't match that, we can instantly throw an error and say invalid user. Like you messed up, you need to go back to the form and enter better stuff. But if it was valid, we then hash the password. So hash the password. Once we have the hashed password, we insert that user into our database and then redirect to a login page. So now that that user exists, they can log in. Let's take a quick break. So let's actually implement that. And if we look at our checklist, users can sign up for the app with a unique email. So that's what we're going to be working on right now. So if you go back to Atom, and we'll actually create this sign up route. So I do have this to-do file in here. I don't know if I'm going to be like jumping back and forth between this and the standards, but this is like at a very detailed level what you need to do, and then the standards are at a bit more of a high level what you need to be able to do to check that off. But we're going to be working on this first one, allowing users to sign up with a unique email. So the first thing I'm going to do inside of this Express app is create an Auth folder. So let's create a new folder, call it Auth. And then inside of there, I'm going to create a new file and call it index.js. Now inside of here, I'm going to create an Express router. Now this router is going to be exactly the same as like our user router. So if you've been perusing the code, you've seen user.js and routes. These are the two routes that I showed you the example of. So you can get one specific user with all the necessary validation, and then get the stickers for one specific user. So this is a route, but we're going to create a router for login. So it's going to be very similar to this. So let's say, let's bring in Express, and then we'll create a router. So for that, you invoke the router function on Express, and then we'll export this router. So module.exports equals router. And this just makes this router available to the outside world, so mainly so we can mount it in app.js. Right here, I'm going to create a basic route, so router.get. And this is purely to see if it's working. I don't want to get too far before actually seeing if stuff works. So when there's a get route to the auth router, let's just respond with JSON. Nice little message. And fun fact, Command Control Space will bring up the emoji menu. Which one do I want? I want the lock. Yeah, because we're working on authorization. So to just get this router working, I should see this response back when I try it out. So to make this work, we need to go into app.js and actually require in that router. So here we'll say var auth equals require. We can go to auth/index, and that will grab that specific file. Now, fun fact, you can just remove that, and it means exactly the same thing. So if it finds an index.js in that folder, it will actually use that. So now we've required in that router right there. And let's actually mount it. So I'm going to put it right here above my two other routers, and I'm going to say app.use auth. So any request that begins with /auth will go into the auth router that I have defined. And so now, if I have done everything correctly, we should be able to go back to the browser, go to localhost 3000/auth, and we should see this message. Now, a quick review of what I just did. So in the auth folder, we have this index.js file. We've defined the router. We've exported it. We have a simple get route on / that returns a JSON object with a message of an emoji. And then we mount that router in this file. We first require it in. We then mount it at /auth. So when a GET request comes in to /auth, this request handler is now running. So seems to be in working order. Now what we want to do is create a sign up route on the auth router. So if I say router.post, and so if you remember back to our diagram, when someone enters in a login form, it's a post request with, not a login, sorry, a sign up form. It's a post request with their user information to the server. So when they post to /signup, we'll bring in the request and the response. And again, let's just make sure this is working. So get a message, and he'll just do like a checkbox because it's working. So when we see a post request to auth/signup, and let me add a note up here. So like routes are, let's say route paths are prepended with /auth. So when I make a post request to /auth/signup, I should see this message. So let's try that with Postman real quick. Yeah, so let's get rid of this body. Right now, I'm just making a post request to localhost 3000/auth/signup, and I should get back that checkbox. And I do, so that means this route is working. Now let's actually check some boxes, do some things. Yeah, so here, so we have audit our auth router. Validate required fields. So if we look at our standards, we want to make sure that, so these, user can log in to the app with a valid email and password, can't have a blank or missing email, can't have a blank or incorrect password. So by validating the required fields, we're working on those specific standards. So let's do that. So right here, I'm going to create a function. I'm going to say valid user. I'll say validate user. And that will take in a user and then do stuff. But what we want to pay attention to is those specific standards that we're trying to meet. So user can log in with the app with a valid email and password. So email cannot be missing or blank, and users cannot log into the app with a blank or incorrect password. So let's do some validation right here. So let's say const valid email equals. So users should have an email property, and that email property should be a type of string. And so first, that verifies that it is a string. It's not like a number or something like that. And then we want to make sure that also it's not blank. So if it's a string, I can actually call this trim function. So trim. And that will remove all the white space on the edges. And if that is not equal to the empty string, then we know we have a valid email because it's not blank or missing, right? So this makes sure it's a string, and this makes sure that it's not empty. So that means it actually has that property. And actually, if it didn't have that property, the type of would be undefined. So that would also satisfy this missing option. Now we do need to do basically the exact same thing, but for the password. Oh no. Okay, so now instead of valid email, we'll say valid password. So we're going to make sure that the password is a string. We're going to make sure that it's not empty. And this isn't in the standards, but I'm just going to make sure, actually let's indent that one. I'm just going to make sure that the password is longer than 6 characters. Actually, the password when you trim it is longer than 6 characters. So greater than or equal to 6 characters. Now, if both of those things are true, so if we have a valid email and we have a valid password, that means we have a valid user. And I'm going to name this valid user, not valid users, because this returns true if the user was valid. So let's use this function. So now in signup, we'll say if valid user. Now, what are we actually validating? We are validating rec.body because that is the user that they're signing up with. Like that's the information coming to the server that has their user information. So if the user represented in the body of the request is valid, then we want to do something. Else, we want to send an error. And actually, let's go look at our flow diagram to see what the error should be. So for the signup flow, valid email and password, no, invalid user error. So we need to just return an error that says invalid user. So right here, let's just use the next function. So if we pass in next to this request handler, we can now pass on an error to the error handler. So if we say next and then pass in a new error, and here let's just say invalid user. And so now that will actually send back the error. So if we want to test this, we should be able to do that because right now I'm not even trying to insert anything into the database. I'm just checking to see that the body of the request is valid. So if I send this, we actually are getting an error. Invalid user. However, it is all HTML. So let's just fix that real quick. Like I want to see a JSON error, not an HTML error. So if you go to app.js, And in here, at the very bottom of the file, this is actually the error handler. So when we call next and pass that error in, this is the thing that runs. And right now, it is rendering the error view. But instead of rendering the error view, and actually we can we see this? Yeah, if I go to localhost 3000/not found. Yeah, this is actually the error page that has like the message, the status code, and then like the actual error. And that's what we're seeing in Postman. So this is actually the error. But we want that to be JSON instead. So in here, instead of rendering an error, I'm just going to res.json an error. So I'm going to leave all this stuff up here right now, but in a second, I'm just going to comment it all out. So if there was an error, we want to respond with JSON. And you'll notice it's doing something interesting here. It's putting a message on locals and putting error on locals. And by putting it on locals, that actually makes it available inside of the view. So if we look at views and then error, you'll see that it's looking for a message property and an error property. So by putting message and error on locals, it actually makes them available in the view. But since we're not rendering anything, we don't really need to do that. But in the JSON that we send back, we'll actually give it a message just like the view had. Set that equal to error.message. We'll also have an error, just like the view had, but then set that equal to this value. And make sure you don't copy that semicolon because we're pasting this into an object, right? So this is an object that has two properties, message, which is error.message, comma, error, which is this piece of work right here, which basically determines if you're in development or not and decides to show the stack trace. If we look at this, this is the stack trace. This is like the history of all the things that have happened to get to that error. And when you're in production, you actually don't want to show this because this could reveal secret information about your server and potentially give an attacker more information than you would like to give them. Okay, so now in this case, I'm totally returning JSON. I can just get rid of all of this stuff because it's doing the same thing. Well, actually, I don't want to get rid of status, sorry. Because we still want to either use the status that was passed on to us or set it to 500. But now we no longer need to render the view, so I can get rid of that. And now, when I do something that requires an error, we actually get back this JSON object rather than a rendered view. Now that was a bit of a tangent, but it's a good tip. When you're creating an Express app that only returns JSON, you're going to want to do something like this in your error handler. And now if we do the same thing here, that actually just renders a JSON. So our API is pretty JSONified. So, and the reason we did that was because of this right here. So like we tried to validate the user, and then they were not valid, so we sent that error, and we wanted to see that as JSON. So what if they were valid? Let's see if we can check a box. So we have validated the required fields. We need to check if the email is unique. And actually, let's look at our standards for that. So, and actually, let's check this off. So users cannot, well, this is login. No, this is for login, but I would say it applies to signup as well. I'm not sure why that's not on there. Just a second. Yeah, it's misbehaving. So we're in the process of signing up. I guess we're on this next one. Cannot sign up for the app with a duplicate email. So right now in this post route, we're going to be accepting the user information that they're logging up with, right? Let's look at our diagram. Remember where we are in this. Here. So the user has entered their information into a form and clicked enter. That's making a post request to our server with that data. We have validated it. So like we made sure that the email is cool and the password is cool. We now need to see if there is a user in the database with that email. Make sure that it's unique. So if you look in our DB folder, there's this user.js file. This is actually where we have the queries for our user table. And if you look at our migrations, you can actually see our user table. It has an email, a password, a date, and an is active column. But on this queries file here, we want to create a new query to get a user by their email. So make sure you throw a comma there and then say get one by email. This is going to be a very similar function, but in this case, we're accepting the email. And in here, we want to return connects for the user table. But instead of searching by ID, we want to search by email and grab the first one. So now in my auth file, I can actually require in this file and use this method to actually search the database. So right in here, we'll say user, I'll have to require it in. Please remind me if I forget to. So get one by email, we'll pass in rec.body.email. And then that should give us back a user. And then we'll just log that user. And now notice this res.json is outside of that. We want to move that into the then because this is an asynchronous thing. It's a promise. And we want to wait until we've actually found the one with that email and then eventually respond. And actually, let's try to send back the user as well. So again, we're just testing this bit by bit. We're not actually inserting them into the database yet. But now we're checking to see if what the information you're signing up with already exists in the database. So if you go over to Postman, and in here, you're gonna want to select body, and then raw, and then JSON, because we're gonna be posting JSON to the server. Here, create an empty object. I'll zoom in for you. No. Create an empty object where it has a property of email. This could be anything you like, so hello@world.com. And a password. And for now, let's just do 1, 2, 3. Like let's make sure that it's still validating the password. So if I do that and try to post it, it does say invalid user. But what if I give it a valid password? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Remember, it has to be at least 6 long. And send that. User is not defined. Cool, good error. So I told you to remind me, you didn't, shame on you, but I need to actually require this in. So up top, if I say const user, we're pulling this in from the DB file. Remember, because that's where it has that get one by email method on it. So we want to pull that in. So go up one directory into the DB folder and grab the user file. And now we should get back a better error. Yeah, message check. But what that means is we tried to find one with that email, logged it, and then sent message check. But you'll notice there is no user on there, so it actually was not defined. And if we look at the log, user undefined. So it looked in the database and it didn't find anything with hello@world.com. But check it out. What if I put something that's already in there? So hello@cjr.co.de. That's my email. And that was actually seeded into the database, so that should be there. If I do that, it actually found the user and actually sent all that information back, right? So this part right here. And if we look in the console, yeah, it actually found the user. So here's what I can do. I can check to see if the user was undefined. So right here, if we say if not user, meaning, break timer. Okay, quick break. I'll do a little bit more and then take a break and come back to it. So if not user, meaning the user was not found. And I'll add a little comment there. So if user not found. So if the user was not found, then this is a unique, how do you spell unique? Something like that? Yeah, it looks good. So this is a unique email. Else, email in use, right? It's already duplicate. So, and remember, this res.json is down here. Now, let's move that into here. So if the user was not found, we're gonna do something. Right now, let's just check the message. Like the user was not found. We're getting ready to insert you into the database. Otherwise, the email was in use. Now, in this case, we can use the next method again. So we can do next, new error, and say email in use. And now that will forward an error that the email is in use. So if I have done this correctly, now when I try to sign up with an email that is in use, I should get that message, email in use. But if I try to sign up with something that's not in use, like hello@world.com, it just gives me a success message. And so this means we're actually ready to hash the password. But let's check some boxes. So we are now checking if the email is unique. We next need to hash the password. Let's look at our standards as well. User can sign up for the app with a unique email. Yes, we are now checking to see if it's unique. User cannot sign up for the app with a duplicate email. Correct, because you saw it before. When I tried it with a duplicate email, it actually said email in use. Let's see it again. Yeah, that's a box check if you ever ask me. User can log into the app with valid email and password. We have not worked on any of that yet. Yeah, so all that stuff is up and coming. All right, so I'll do a quick review. We'll do a zoom out. We'll zoom out, see what we have created, and then I'll take a break and we'll get back into it. So right now we are working on the sign up route. And there are lots of steps involved in this because this is a pretty sensitive issue, right? Like users are signing up to your site with a secret password that only they know. Like they're protecting some sort of information. So by getting these steps right, it's absolutely crucial. So the first thing you do is you validate that the person that's signing up has a valid email and password. So we wrote this function up above to validate that there was an email on the user, there was a password on the user, and the password was longer than 6 characters. That returns true or false. So if it returns true, that means the thing that they're signing up with, the email and the password, is valid. If it returns false, then that means that they sent us invalid information. So we can actually use this next function to send an error with invalid user. Now, if we remind ourselves over back in app.js, at the bottom of the file is this error handler that we updated. And now instead of sending HTML, this error handler actually sends JSON. So we call the error handler by passing in an error. Now, if the user was valid, if we did have a valid email and password, we then want to check to see if that email is unique, meaning if there is already a user in our database with that email. So if we go over to the database, we created this query, get one by email, that checks to see if there's someone in the database with that email. Now, if not users, so this thing will actually return undefined if there were no users with that email. So here we use the falsy part of JavaScript to say if that user was not found, then yes, the thing you're signing up with is a unique email. However, if it was found, then that email is in use. And we, again, use the next function to send an error onto the error handler. Otherwise, it's a unique email, and we can hash the password. We can insert user into DB. And finally, we can redirect. So I'm going to take a break, but these are the things we're going to work on when I get back.